Get out of our school. You don't belong here. The words sliced through the humid Ohio air, sharp and venomous. A group of boys surrounded a lone black teenager in the crowded hallway of Lincoln High. Their sneers formed a wall, their voices laced with hate. The boy's fingers trembled slightly at his sides, not from fear but from the sheer effort of holding back a power that could send these guys sprawling with a single blow. His name was Nathan Carter, and he was fighting a war inside himself. Why didn't he strike back? Because of a promise to his father, a promise etched into his soul. But that promise was teetering on the edge of breaking. Subscribe to our channel before you dive in. The bell rang, shrill and insistent, signaling the end of another period. At Lincoln High School, a sprawling brick building in a quiet Ohio town, students poured into the halls. Their laughter and shouts bounced off the lockers, a chaotic symphony of teenage energy. Among them, one boy moved like a shadow, head down, steps quick and deliberate. Nathan Carter, 17, was new here, 3 months new. To be exact, his short-cropped hair framed a face with sharp, expressive eyes that seemed to see everything and reveal nothing. His skin, a deep brown, stood out in a school where most faces were pale, and that difference had marked him from day one. 3 months ago, Nathan's world had shattered. His father, James Carter, the only family he'd ever known, died in a car accident on a rain-slicked highway. The loss was a wound that hadn't healed, a raw ache Nathan carried in silence, with no one else. He'd been sent across the country to live with distant cousins in Ohio, strangers who meant well but could never fill the void. Lincoln High was his fresh start, or so he'd hoped. On his first day, he'd stood at his locker, arranging his textbooks with care, their crisp pages a symbol of possibility. Maybe he'd make friends, maybe he'd belong, but hope was a fragile thing, and reality was quick to crush it. Look at him, acting like he fits in, a voice sneered from behind, low but loud enough to carry. Nathan's hand froze on his locker door, his heart sinking. He didn't turn around, but he heard the whispers, sharp as glass. Nathan's so quiet, man, always mumbling sorry like he's scared. What's his deal? The words came from a group of girls nearby, their giggles cutting deeper than they knew. In just 3 months, Nathan's dreams of belonging had crumbled into dust. Last week, a kid in math class had laughed. Yo, Nathan's like a ghost. Is he even here? 3 days ago, during a group project, another voice had dismissed him. Don't bother with Carter. He has nothing to say. Probably doesn't even understand the work. Nathan had learned to stay silent. Silence was his shield, his way to survive, in a place where his skin made him a target. He kept his head down, his words few, his presence small, but silence couldn't protect him from everything or everyone. Hey, Carter, you alone again? The voice was loud, mocking, and all too familiar. Nathan's grip tightened on his locker handle as David Thompson swaggered over, flanked by his crew, 3 other boys, all broad-shouldered and brimming with the confidence of those who ruled the school. David was the golden boy of Lincoln High, captain of the football team, with a smile that charmed teachers, and a cruelty that owned the halls. His blonde hair and blue eyes seemed to scream privilege, and he wielded it like a weapon. What's the matter? Too good to talk to us? David's smirk widened as his friends snickered. Or is it a you people thing? Can't even look us in the eye? Nathan didn't respond. He kept his gaze on his locker, arranging his books with deliberate care, as if the words didn't burn. That was his rule. Don't engage. Don't react. It was the only way to make it through the day. But David wasn't done. He stepped closer, his shadow looming over Nathan. Yo, I'm talking to you! A hard shove sent Nathan crashing against the wall, his shoulders slamming into the cold metal of the lockers. His backpack slipped from his arm, hitting the floor with a thud, pens and papers scattering like fallen leaves. The hallway didn't stop. Students passed by, some glancing curiously, others pretending not to see. A few smirked, entertained by the show. No one stepped in, no one ever did. Nathan was alone, wrapped in a suffocating cocoon of isolation. He knelt to gather his things, his movements slow and deliberate, as if moving too fast might betray the storm inside him. David laughed, a harsh bark. Man, you're boring. At least give us something. You're not a statue, Carter. He nudged one of Nathan's pens with his sneaker, kicking it across the floor. His friends joined in, their laughter echoing as they walked away, leaving Nathan to pick up the pieces of his dignity. As Nathan reached for a stray pen, his fingers brushed against it, and a faint crack broke the air. The cheap plastic pen split in two, its jagged edges glinting under the fluorescent lights. He hadn't meant to do it. His hand froze, his breath catching. He loosened his grip, forcing himself to breathe slowly, deeply, as if he could exhale the power coursing through him. A girl nearby gasped, her eyes wide. "Did you see that?" she whispered to her friend, who shook her head, dismissing it. No one would believe it, not from Nathan, the quiet kid who took every insult without a word. A kid like him with that kind of strength? Impossible. But it wasn't impossible if Nathan let go. If he gave in to the anger simmering in his chest, he could snap David's arm like a twig. He could send him and his crew to the floor in seconds, their smug faces replaced with fear. He'd done it before, not to David, but to someone else, someone he cared about. The memory hit him like a punch, vivid and raw. His best friend Marcus lying on the gym floor, clutching his chest, his breaths ragged and pained. It was supposed to be a friendly sparring match at their old boxing gym, but Nathan's punch had landed too hard, cracking Marcus's rib. That one mistake had cost Marcus his shot at nationals, his dreams shattered by Nathan's strength. That night, his father had sat him down in their small living room, the dim light casting shadows on his serious face. "Nathan," he'd said, his voice steady but heavy, "your strength isn't for hurting people. Boxing is for protecting what matters: your family, your friends, your heart. Until you understand what that means, you don't raise your fists against anyone. Promise me." His father's eyes had been stern but warm, filled with a love that demanded better. Nathan had nodded, the weight of the promise settling into his bones. "I promise, Dad." 3 months later, his father was gone, taken by a screech of tires and a storm-slicked road. Nathan stared at the broken pen in his hand, its jagged edges a reminder of his failure. He tucked it into his pocket, his resolve hardening. He'd keep his promise, no matter what David did, no matter how much it hurt. He had to. The final bell of the day rang, a sharp note that felt like release. Nathan slipped through the crowded halls, avoiding eye contact, his steps quick as he left Lincoln High behind. He headed toward the edge of town, where a rundown strip mall sat, its faded signs and cracked pavement, a stark contrast to the school's polished halls. At the end of the row was the Pinewind boxing gym, its weathered sign barely legible. To Nathan, it was a beacon, the one place where he could breathe. Inside, the air smelled of sweat, leather, and history, a scent that reminded him of the gyms back home, of sparring with his dad, of better days. He changed into his gear, worn gloves and a faded tank top, and stepped into the ring at the center of the gym. Here, he wasn't the quiet kid who took every insult, his posture straight, his movements precise, his presence unshakable. He shadow-boxed, his fists cutting through the air, with a rhythm born of years of practice. Each jab, each hook, was a story of discipline, of thousands of hours, spent honing his body into a weapon. But beneath the grace of his movements, there was fear, a fear that had nothing to do with David or his crew. Every punch brought back Marcus's face, twisted in pain on the gym floor. Nathan had been careless, too caught up in the moment, and his strength had betrayed him, protecting what matters, his father had said. But what did that mean when Nathan couldn't even protect himself? From the taunts, the shoves, the slurs that followed him like shadows at school? He was powerless, not because he was weak, but because he chose to be. He let David's words slide off him, let the hallway crowds ignore him, because using his strength would mean breaking his promise, and breaking his promise would mean losing the last piece of his father he had left. Sweat dripped onto the mat, each drop a silent question. What am I protecting? Myself? My dad's memory? The answers felt out of reach, and the weight of it pressed against his chest. He threw a final punch, the air hissing as his fist snapped forward, and then he stopped, breathing hard, his hands falling to his sides. The gym was quiet, save for the faint hum of a fan in the corner. From the shadows, a pair of eyes watched him. Sarah Miller, A white girl with chestnut hair tied back in a tight ponytail stood leaning against the wall, her blue eyes sharp and curious. She was one of the few girls at Pinewind, a junior at Lincoln High like Nathan, though their paths rarely crossed at school. Sarah knew the Nathan from the hallways, the kid who kept his head down, who took David's racist jabs without a word. But the Nathan in the ring, he was something else entirely. Sarah had seen plenty of boxers at the gym, but none moved like Nathan. His footwork was liquid, his punches precise, each movement radiating a quiet intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. This guy is no amateur, she thought. He is the real deal. She'd heard the whispers at school, the slurs tossed at Nathan when he passed, and the way David and his crew singled him out because of his skin. She'd seen him endure it, silent and stoic, and it baffled her. Why didn't he fight back? He could crush them. She'd felt that same helplessness once, back when she was the one being pushed around, laughed at, ignored. Boxing had been her way out, her way to rebuild herself. But Nathan? He was already strong, stronger than anyone she'd ever seen, so why did he let them walk all over him? Practice ended, and Sarah found herself walking toward him, her sneakers squeaking on the worn floor. Nathan was unwrapping his gloves, his back to her, his focus on the task. "Hey," she said, her voice breaking the silence. Nathan glanced up, startled, his eyes weary. "That was unreal," she said, crossing her arms. "Your form is like something straight out of a pro match. Where do you learn to move like that?" Nathan shrugged, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thanks. Just practice." He looked away, busying himself with his gloves. Sarah studied him, her curiosity growing. He wasn't just quiet. He was guarded, like he was carrying something heavy. She decided to push one question. "Why don't you fight back? I saw what David did today in the hall. You could take him out without breaking a sweat. So why just take it?" Nathan's shoulders stiffened, his fingers pausing on the straps of his gloves. The question hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. For a moment, Sarah thought he wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice so soft she almost missed it, he said, "I can't. I don't want to hurt anyone. Boxing is not for that." His words were heavy, like they carried a story he wasn't ready to tell. Sarah frowned, her frustration bubbling up. "That's crazy. You let them treat you like that, call you those names, push you around because you don't want to hurt them. If you don't stand up, they'll never stop. That's how it works." Her voice softened, but only slightly. She wasn't trying to be cruel, but she didn't get it. She'd fought her way out of being a target, why wouldn't he? Nathan didn't meet her eyes. He finished unwrapping his gloves and slung his bag over his shoulder. "It's just how I do things," he said quietly, then walked toward the door. Sarah watched him go, her hands on her hips. Fine, she thought. It's his life. But something about Nathan stuck with her, like a puzzle she couldn't solve. He wasn't weak. She'd seen that in the ring. So what was holding him back? Nathan stepped into the cool evening air, the gym's door creaking shut behind him. The streets were quiet, the strip mall's neon lights flickering in the dusk. He pulled his hoodie up, his breath visible in the chilly air, and started the walk home. His father's words echoed in his mind, as clear as the day he'd spoken them. Protect what matters. Nathan had promised to honor that, to keep his strength in check, to never let it become a weapon of harm. But every day at Lincoln High tested that promise, every slur, every shove, every laugh chipped away at it. He could feel the cracks forming, the anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. As he walked, he thought of Marcus. His friend's pained face burned into his memory. He thought of his father, the man who'd taught him to be better, to be stronger in ways that didn't involve fists. And he thought of the pen, broken in his hand, a reminder of what he could do if he let go. Nathan clenched his jaw, his steps quickening. He'd keep his promise. He had to. But deep down, a question nagged at him. What happens when silence isn't enough? The days at Lincoln High blurred into a rhythm of endurance. Nathan woke each morning with a knot in his stomach, bracing for the slurs, the shoves, the laughter that greeted him in the halls. He'd learned to navigate the school like a minefield, avoiding the spots where David and his crew held court, near the cafeteria, by the gym lockers outside the science wing. But David was relentless, a predator who smelled weakness. Yesterday, it was a joke about Nathan's hair, loud enough for half the class to hear. The day before, it was a shove in the lunch line, David's elbow digging into Nathan's ribs with a smirk. Oops, didn't see you there, Carter. Each incident was a test, and Nathan passed by staying silent, his fists unclenched, his eyes on the floor. But silence didn't erase the sting. It didn't stop the way his heart raced when David's voice boomed, or the way his muscles tensed, ready to unleash the power he'd spent years honing. In the boxing ring, Nathan was strong, stronger than anyone at Lincoln High knew. He could end David's taunts in a heartbeat, could leave him sprawled on the floor without breaking a sweat. But every time the urge rose, so did his father's voice. Your strength is for protecting, Nathan, not hurting. That promise was all he had left of his dad, and he clung to it even as it burned. The Pine Wind boxing gym was his refuge. Every afternoon, Nathan slipped away from school, his sneakers pounding the cracked pavement of the strip mall until he reached the gym's faded door. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of sweat and leather, a familiar comfort that loosened the knot in his chest. In the ring, he wasn't the quiet kid who took every insult. He was Nathan Carter, trained by his father since he was old enough to throw a punch. His jabs were sharp, his footwork fluid, each movement a testament to years of discipline. But even here, doubt crept in as he shadow boxed. His mind replayed the hallway, David's sneer, the cracked pen from yesterday. What am I protecting? He wondered, his fists slicing the air. Myself? Dad's memory? The answers stayed out of reach, and his punches grew harder, as if he could force them to surface. Watching from the corner of the gym was Sarah Miller, her chestnut ponytail swinging as she leaned against the wall. She'd been coming to Pinewind for a year, drawn to boxing after her own run-ins with bullies. Not racial, but cruel all the same. Sarah knew Nathan from school, the kid who never fought back, who let David's crew hurl slurs without a word. She'd seen him in the halls, head down, shoulders hunched, and assumed he was just scared. But in the ring, Nathan was a revelation. His movements were precise, powerful, almost beautiful in their control. He has no beginner's luck, she thought, her blue eyes narrowing. He has better skill than anyone here, so why did he let David walk all over him? Sarah had her own ghosts. A year ago, she'd been the one tripping in the halls, her books scattered by girls who laughed at her thrift store clothes and clumsy shyness. Boxing had given her confidence, a way to stand taller. But the fear still lingered. She saw that fear in Nathan, or thought she did. After practice, as Nathan unwrapped his gloves, she approached, her sneakers squeaking on the mat. Hey, she said, her voice casual but curious. Your form is insane, like pro level. Where do you learn that? Nathan glanced up, his eyes guarded. Just training, he mumbled, focusing on his gloves. Sarah crossed her arms undeterred. Okay, but seriously, I saw David shove you today. You could have laid him out. Why didn't you? Her question was blunt, cutting through the gym's quiet hum. Nathan's hands stilled, his shoulders tensing. For a moment, Sarah thought he'd brush her off. Then, in a voice barely audible, he said, I don't want to hurt anyone. Boxing is not for that. Sarah blinked, caught off guard. That's it? You let them call you those names? Push you around, because you don't want to hurt them? Her tone was sharp, frustration creeping in. Look, I get it. I used to eat crap like that too, but you don't have to. You're stronger than them, Nathan. If you don't push back, they'll never stop. She wasn't trying to be harsh, but she couldn't wrap her head around it. She'd fought to escape her past. Why wouldn't he? Nathan didn't meet her eyes. He slung his bag over his shoulder and muttered, It's how I do things. Then he was gone. The gym door creaking shut behind him. Sarah stared after him, her hands on her hips. He's not scared, she realized. He's holding back. But why? Nathan was a puzzle, and she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him than he let on. The next day, something shifted. Sarah started noticing Nathan more, her eyes catching him in the halls when David tripped him during a class change. Nathan's books spilling across the floor. Sarah's throat tightened. Stop it, she wanted to shout, but the words stuck. Her fists clenched, nails digging into her palms. She remembered her own humiliations. The laughter that followed her falls, the way no one had helped. She'd sworn she was past that boxing had made her strong, but standing there, watching Nathan pick up his books, she froze. Pathetic, she thought. I'm no better than the kids who ignored me. Still, she couldn't look away. In history class, Nathan opened his textbook to find a page defaced with a racial slur scrawled in thick black marker. His face didn't change, but his hands shook as he closed the book. Sarah, sitting nearby, acted on impulse. She slid her own textbook across the desk. Use mine, she said softly. I've got this stuff memorized. It was a lie. She needed her notes for the upcoming test. But the small thanks from Nathan made her chest feel lighter, like she'd done something right. Gym class was worse. Nathan stretched alone in a corner, ignored by the groups forming for basketball. Sarah hesitated, her heart pounding. Sitting next to him could make her a target, could drag her back to the days when she was the one laughed at. But she thought of Nathan in the ring, his strength, his silence. She took a breath and plopped down beside him. Better spot here, she said, her voice casual but her hands shaking. Nathan looked up, surprised, their eyes meeting for a fleeting second. It was a small gesture, clumsy and awkward. But to Nathan, it was a crack of light in his dark world. Their paths began to cross more often at the gym. Sarah watched Nathan's sessions with growing awe. His punches were like poetry, each one deliberate, powerful yet restrained. She started lingering after practice, and one evening, as Nathan bought water from the vending machine outside the strip mall, she joined him, grabbing a sports drink. They stood in silence, the hum of the machine filling the gap. Nathan broke it first, his voice soft. Why do you help me? Sarah froze, the question catching her off guard. She looked at the darkening sky, searching for words. I don't know, she admitted finally. I just couldn't keep watching you. You remind me of me back when I was the one getting pushed around. Her voice wavered, and she laughed, a bitter sound. I started boxing to stop feeling helpless. I thought I was past it, but when I saw David trip you, I froze. Couldn't even say anything. It took me forever just to talk to you. Lame, right? Nathan didn't reply, but his eyes softened, listening. Sarah kept going, her words spilling out. I thought you were like me, too scared to fight back. But then I saw you in the ring. You're not scared, Nathan. You're strong, stronger than anyone I've ever seen. But you choose not to fight. I don't get it. That kind of strength? I don't have it. She looked at him, her blue eyes searching his face. You're not weak. You're something else. Nathan's chest tightened. Her words hit something deep, a part of him he'd kept buried. For the first time since his father's death, he felt seen not as the quiet kid, not as the target, but as himself. Thanks, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah grinned, a little embarrassed. Yeah, well, don't get used to me being all sappy. She punched his shoulder lightly and walked off, leaving Nathan staring after her. A small spark flickered in his heart. He wasn't alone. Someone else knew what it was like to hurt, to fight, to keep going. Their friendship grew quietly. At school, they started eating lunch together, in the cafeteria's corner, away from David's crew. Sarah marveled at Nathan's homemade sandwiches, neatly packed with sliced vegetables. You made this? It's like restaurant level, she said, holding up a carrot stick carved into a star. Nathan smiled, a rare sight. Just normal stuff. Sarah laughed. Normal? This is art, man. They chuckled, and for Nathan, the world felt a little brighter, a little less heavy. Friends. He was starting to understand what that meant. But the peace was fragile. David's taunts didn't stop. If anything, they got worse. His words sharper, his shoves harder. What is a guy like you doing here, Carter? Go back to where you came from. The slurs stung, each one a reminder of Nathan's place in Lincoln High's hierarchy. He endured his silence as a fortress, but Sarah's presence made it harder to stay quiet. She saw him, really saw him, and that made the promise to his father feel heavier. Protect what matters. What did that mean when Sarah was sitting next to him, her own courage faltering but real? One afternoon, as they left the gym, Nathan noticed Sarah's steps were slower, her eyes distant. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low. She nodded too quickly, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just tired." But Nathan saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped her bag. Something was wrong, and he had a sinking feeling it was because of him. David's crew didn't like that. Sarah was hanging around him, the black kid they'd marked as an outsider. Nathan's fists clenched, the promise to his father warring with a new instinct to protect the one person who stood by him. As they parted ways, Nathan's stomach churned. He thought of his father's words, of Marcus's pain, of the pen cracking in his hand. He thought of Sarah, her clumsy kindness, her quiet strength. The promise was still there, heavy and unyielding, but for the first time, Nathan wondered if keeping it meant more than just staying silent. What if protecting what matters means standing up? The question followed him into the night, a spark that refused to fade. The days following Nathan's talk with Sarah were a quiet shift, like the calm before a storm. Their friendship, still new and fragile, became a lifeline. At lunch, they claimed a corner table in the cafeteria, away from the chaos of David's crew. Nathan's homemade sandwiches, packed with care, drew Sarah's attention. "Ah, man, you're out here carving veggies into stars," she said, holding up a cucumber slice shaped like a flower. "This is next level." Nathan's lips twitched into a rare smile. "Just something I picked up from my dad," Sarah grinned, biting into the cucumber. "Your dad was a chef or something?" Nathan shook his head, his smile fading. "Nah, just taught me to do things right." The mention of his father brought a familiar ache, but Sarah's laughter softened it, like sunlight breaking through clouds. For Nathan, those moments were a revelation. He'd been alone for so long, carrying the weight of his father's death and the relentless racism at Lincoln High. Sarah's presence, her quick wit, her clumsy kindness made the world feel less heavy. She didn't pry, didn't push him to talk about the slurs or the shoves, but her quiet solidarity spoke louder than words. Friends, the word felt new, real, and Nathan held it close, like a secret he was just beginning to understand. But the peace was a thin veneer. David and his crew hadn't let up. If anything, Nathan's growing bond with Sarah seemed to fuel their cruelty in the halls. David's taunts grew sharper, laced with venom. "What is a guy like you doing with her, Carter? Think you're one of us now?" The word us dripped with disdain, a reminder that Nathan's black skin marked him as an outsider. During gym, a basketball accidentally slammed into Nathan's back, followed by David's mocking, "My bad, didn't see you there." The laughter from his friends echoed, and Nathan's fists clenched, his promise to his father a tether holding him back. Sarah saw it all. She caught Nathan's eye after each incident, her jaw tight, her hands balled into fists. She wanted to say something, do something, but her own past held her back. A year ago, she'd been the target of cruel jokes, her clothes mocked, her confidence shredded. Boxing had given her strength, but the fear of being targeted again lingered. Still, she couldn't stay silent forever. One day, as David accidentally knocked Nathan's books to the floor, Sarah stepped forward, her voice shaking but firm. "Cut it out, David." The words were small, but they stopped David mid-laugh. He turned his smirk cold. "What, you his bodyguard now, Miller?" Sarah's cheeks flushed, but she held her ground. "Just leave him alone." David's eyes narrowed, a dangerous glint in them. "Careful, Miller. Hang with him, and you're gonna regret it." The threat hung in the air, and Sarah's heart raced, but she didn't back down. Nathan, picking up his books, gave her a look gratitude mixed with worry. He knew what it cost her to speak up. That moment, brief as it was, tightened the bond between them, but it also painted a target on Sarah's back. At the Pine Wind boxing gym, Nathan found solace. But even there, the weight of school followed him. His punches were sharper now, each jab carrying the frustration he couldn't voice. Sarah noticed the change during their sessions. Nathan's movements, always precise, had an edge. Now a raw intensity that made the air in the gym feel electric. She watched from the sidelines, her own gloves on, marveling at how he moved like a storm, contained in human form. Yes, holding back, she thought, not just in the ring, but everywhere. After practice, as they sat on a bench outside the gym, sipping water under the flickering streetlights, Sarah broke the silence. "You're different in there," she said, nodding toward the gym. "Like you're free, not like at school." Nathan stared at his bottle, his thumb tracing the label. "It's the only place I can be me," he said quietly. "No one's judging me there. No one's throwing slurs." Sarah nodded, understanding more than she could say. "I get it. I started boxing because I was tired of feeling small. Thought it'd make me brave, but I'm still scared half the time." She laughed a little bitterly. "Seeing you take all that crap from David makes me mad. You could end him, Nathan. Why don't you?" Nathan's jaw tightened. His father's words echoed. "Protect. Don't hurt. I made a promise. I promised my dad that my strength isn't for hurting people. I hurt someone once, my best friend Marcus. We were sparring, and I hit him too hard, broke his rib. He couldn't compete after that. It was my fault." His voice cracked, and he looked away, the memory raw. "Dad said boxing's for protecting what matters. I promised I'd never use it to hurt anyone again." Sarah listened, her heart aching. She saw the pain in his eyes, the weight of that promise. "That's heavy," she said softly. "But, Nathan, what about protecting yourself? Or, I don't know, protecting someone else?" Nathan didn't answer, but her words struck a chord. Protecting someone else? The idea felt new, dangerous, and he pushed it down, afraid of what it might mean. The storm broke on a Thursday afternoon. Nathan waited at the gym for Sarah, their usual routine after school, but she didn't show. The clock ticked past their meeting time, and worry nagged at him. He grabbed his bag and headed to the school's courtyard, where he found her sitting on a bench alone. Her eyes were red, her hands clutching torn pages from a notebook. "Sarah?" Nathan's voice was soft, but she flinched, quickly hiding the pages behind her back. "Hey," she said, her voice too bright. "Just chilling." But Nathan saw the tear tracks on her cheeks, the way her hands shook. He knelt beside her, his eyes falling on a crumpled page at her feet. He picked it up, and his stomach dropped. It was Sarah's science notebook, filled with her neat handwriting, now defaced with black marker racial slurs scrawled across the pages, not aimed at her, but at him. "David did this, didn't he?" Nathan's voice was low, controlled, but anger simmered beneath it. Sarah shook her head, her eyes wide. "No, it's nothing. I just dropped it, and it got messed up." The lie was obvious, her voice trembling. Nathan picked up another page, the ink smeared but the words clear. "Sarah, tell me the truth." She bit her lip, tears welling up. "It's not your fault," she whispered. "I swear it's not." But Nathan knew. "It's because of me," he said, his voice barely audible. "Because you're my friend." Sarah's tears spilled over as she grabbed his hands, her grip tight. "No, Nathan! I chose this. I didn't want those jerks to win. They told me to mess up your books, to write those words. I said no, so they did this." Her voice broke, and she held up the ruined notebook, her hands shaking. "I'm not sorry." "You're my friend." Nathan's heart cracked. Sarah had stood up for him, taken the hit meant for him. Her words echoed in his mind. "You're my friend." And then his father's voice said, "Protect what matters." He saw Sarah's tear-streaked face, her courage despite her fear, and something inside him snapped the promise he'd clung to for months. Her words echoed in his mind. "You're my friend." And then his father's voice. "Protect what matters." He saw Sarah's tear-streaked face, her courage, despite her fear, and something inside him snapped the promise he'd clung to for months. It felt like a cage, now holding him back from doing what was right. "Stay here," he said. Standing tall, his voice steady but burning with a quiet fire, Nathan asked, "Where are you going?" Sarah's voice trembled, but he didn't turn back. His eyes were different now, not the soft, guarded gaze she knew, but something fierce. Like a flame that had been smoldering too long, he said, "I've got something to take care of," and walked toward the cafeteria. His steps were deliberate, his heart racing but resolute. The cafeteria was alive with after-school chatter, students grabbing snacks before clubs or practice. David and his crew sat at the back, sprawled across a table, laughing over a pile of fries. Their voices carried loud and careless, as if they owned the room. Nathan's presence cut through the noise like a blade. The chatter faded as he approached. His steps were steady, his posture unshakable. Students sensed the shift, their eyes following him, whispers rippling through the crowd. David noticed him last, his laughter dying as he looked up. "Yo, Carter, you still here?" he said, his tone mocking. "We're kinda busy." His friends snickered, but Nathan didn't flinch. He stopped in front of their table, his voice low but clear, cutting through the silence. "What did you do to Sarah?" The question hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. David blinked, caught off guard, then leaned back with a smirk. "Oh, your little friend? Easy. I told her to mess up your books, write some truth about you." His voice dripped with malice. The word truth stood in for the slurs Nathan knew all too well. "She said no," David continued. "She wouldn't do that to someone like you, so I taught her a lesson. Tore up her notebook, scribbled it up real nice. She was crying, begging me to stop." David's friends burst out laughing, one mimicking Sarah's voice. "Please don't." Nathan's fists trembled, his nails digging into his palms. Sarah's face flashed in his mind, her tears, her courage, her refusal to betray him. "My friend," his father's words roared back. "Protect what matters." He had spent months holding back, enduring every slur, every shove to keep his promise. But this was different. This was Sarah, the one person who had seen him, who had stood by him. He couldn't stay silent anymore. "I'm sorry, Dad," Nathan whispered to himself. His eyes closed for a moment. When he opened them, they burned with calm, unyielding resolve. David stood, his smirk fading into a sneer. "What is that look, Carter? Want to fight?" He grabbed Nathan's collar, his arm cocked back, ready to swing. In that moment, Nathan moved. His body flowed like water, slipping inside David's reach before the punch could land. He didn't strike. Instead, his hand brushed David's wrist, a gentle touch that redirected his force. David's balance crumbled, his own momentum spinning him like a top. He hit the floor with a thud, his breath escaping in a grunt. The cafeteria went silent, every eye locked on the scene. One of David's friends lunged, his fist aiming for Nathan's face. Nathan didn't dodge. He caught the boy's arm, his movements soft but precise, guiding the punch past him. The boy stumbled, his own force betraying him, and he crashed into a table. Another friend charged, then another, but Nathan was untouchable. He didn't punch, didn't kick, just flowed, redirecting their aggression with the ease of a boxer who had trained for years. It wasn't violence. It was art, a display of control that left David's crew sprawled on the floor, their faces twisted in confusion and fear. David staggered to his feet, his face red with rage and humiliation. He grabbed a chair, swinging it at Nathan with a yell. Screams erupted from the crowd, but Nathan didn't flinch. He stepped into the chair's arc, his hands catching David's wrists with a gentleness that belied its power. The chair clattered to the floor, David's strength draining as Nathan held his gaze. "Stop," Nathan said, his voice soft but piercing. There was no anger in his eyes, only a deep, unshakable sorrow. David's knees buckled, and he sank to the floor, defeated not by force, but by something stronger. The cafeteria was a frozen tableau, every student staring in disbelief. Nathan stood at the center, calm and unshaken. His promise to his father bent but not broken. He hadn't hurt them, not really. He had protected Sarah, using his strength the way his father had intended. But the cost of that choice was about to unfold. The silence shattered as a teacher's voice boomed. "What in the world is going on?" Mr. Hargrove, the history teacher, stormed into the cafeteria, his face a mix of confusion and anger. Behind him, two other teachers followed, their eyes scanning the scene. David on his knees, his friends groaning on the floor, and Nathan standing calm and untouched. The crowd parted, students whispering, some pointing at Nathan, others at David. Mr. Hargrove's gaze locked on Nathan. "Carter, did you do this?" Before Nathan could speak, David scrambled to his feet. "He attacked us, Mr. Hargrove!" he shouted, pointing at Nathan. "We were just eating, and he came at us out of nowhere." His friends nodded, their voices overlapping. "Yeah, he jumped us. We didn't do anything." The lies were desperate, a last-ditch effort to save face. Nathan stood silent, his heart pounding. He knew how this worked. Schools like Lincoln High didn't care about reasons. If you fought, you were guilty, especially if you were the outsider. But then a sharp voice cut through. "That's a lie!" Sarah Miller stood at the cafeteria entrance, her chestnut ponytail swinging, her blue eyes blazing. In her hands, she clutched her ruined science notebook, its pages torn and defaced with slurs. She marched toward Mr. Hargrove, her voice trembling but firm. "David did this to my notebook." He has been targeting Nathan for months with racist crap. Today, he went after me because I wouldn't help him hurt Nathan. Nathan was protecting me! She thrust the notebook at Mr. Hargrove, its blackened pages a stark accusation. The teacher's brow furrowed as he took the notebook, flipping through the defaced pages. The crowd murmured, students craning to see. Nathan's chest tightened. Sarah's courage was a light in the dark, but he feared for her. Standing up to David meant she'd face his wrath, just like he had before. Before Mr. Hargrove could respond, a chorus of pings erupted. Phones lit up across the cafeteria. Students pulled out their devices, their eyes widening. "What?" One kid muttered. "It's a live stream. Lincoln High Cafeteria Showdown. It's got 500 viewers already." Nathan turned, following their gazes to a quiet kid in the corner, a freshman named Ethan who rarely spoke. Ethan held his phone, its camera still rolling. "I started recording because I was worried for Nathan," he said, his voice shaking. But then David started talking. The screen showed it all. David bragging about defacing Sarah's notebook, taunting Nathan with slurs, admitting to his crew's plan to teach her a lesson, then Nathan's fluid movements, redirecting their attacks with ease, ending with David's collapse. The comments exploded. "David's a jerk. Nathan's a legend." The video was spreading, and David's face went white as he checked his own phone. "No way," he whispered, seeing his name trending with words like bully and racist. Mr. Hargrove's phone buzzed too, notifications from parents flooding in. He sighed, his shoulders slumping. "David," he said, his voice heavy, "you just broadcast your own confession to the world." David opened his mouth to protest, but Mr. Hargrove cut him off. "No excuses. The evidence is everywhere." He turned to Nathan, his expression softening. "Carter, you've been putting up with this for months, and you protected your friend today. That took restraint." Nathan's eyes stung, a single tear escaping. He hadn't broken his father's promise, not fully. He had used his strength to protect Sarah, not to harm. But the weight of the moment pressed on him, the eyes of the crowd, a mix of awe and guilt. David lunged toward Ethan, yelling, "Delete it now!" But it was too late. The video was saved, shared, spreading beyond Lincoln High. His crew, still sprawled on the floor, looked defeated, their bravado gone. Mr. Hargrove gestured to the other teachers. "Take them to the office. We'll deal with this." As David and his friends were led away, the cafeteria buzzed with whispers. Students stared at Nathan, some with respect, others with shame for staying silent so long. Sarah stepped closer, her hand brushing Nathan's. She didn't say anything, but her grip was steady, grounding. Nathan looked at her, his heart full. For the first time, he felt like he had done something right, not just for himself, but for someone who mattered. "Thank you," he whispered. Sarah squeezed his hand, a small smile breaking through her tears. "You're the one who stood up," she said. "I just told the truth." The crowd began to disperse, but the air was different now. Students who had ignored Nathan before now met his eyes, some nodding, others muttering apologies. Ethan, still holding his phone, approached nervously. "I didn't know it'd blow up like that," he said. I've seen what David does to you. I couldn't stay quiet anymore." Nathan nodded, his throat tight. "You did good," he said. Ethan's face lit up like he had been seen for the first time, too. As the teachers cleared the room, Nathan and Sarah slipped out, the weight of the day settling over them. Outside, the Ohio sky was turning gray, a chill in the air. They walked toward the strip mall, their steps slow, the silence between them comfortable but heavy. Nathan's mind replayed the cafeteria. David's fall, Sarah's voice, the video that changed everything. He had protected Sarah, but at what cost? Would the school see him as the aggressor despite the truth and his father's promise? Had he honored it or bent it too far? Sarah broke the silence. You okay? Nathan nodded, but his eyes were distant. I didn't want to fight, he said. I promised my dad I wouldn't hurt anyone. But you were crying. I couldn't let that slide. Sarah stopped walking, turning to face him. You didn't hurt them, Nathan. You stopped them. There is a difference. Her words were firm, and for a moment, Nathan believed her. His father's voice echoed, protect what matters. Maybe, just maybe, he had done that. They reached the Pine Wind boxing gym, its faded sign a familiar comfort. Inside, they sat on the mats, the quiet hum of the gym wrapping around them. Sarah looked at Nathan, her eyes soft. I'm sorry you had to do that because of me, she said, her eyes on her hands. The one to your dad about not hurting anyone. Nathan shook his head, his gaze fixed on his own hands, the knuckles scarred from years of training. I didn't break it, he said quietly. I used to think keeping that promise meant never fighting, no matter what. I was scared of my strength, scared of hurting someone like I hurt Marcus. He paused, the memory of his friend's pained face still sharp. But in the cafeteria, when I saw you crying, when I heard what David did, I realized something. Dad didn't mean for me to just take it. He meant for me to use my strength to protect what matters. You matter, Sarah. Sarah's eyes widened, a flush creeping up her cheeks. Wow, Carter, getting all deep on me, she teased, but her voice was warm. For real, though, thank you. You had my back. I've never had that before. Nathan smiled a real smile, not the guarded one he had worn for months. Same, he said. You gave me a reason to fight, Sarah grinned, standing and tugging on her gloves. Okay, enough mushy stuff. Spar with me. Nathan raised an eyebrow. You sure? I don't go easy. Sarah laughed, tying her hair back. Bring it, tough guy. They faced each other in the ring, bowing with respect, their shouts echoing as their fists met the air. Their shadows danced on the mats, a perfect blend of strength and trust, illuminated by the fading Sunday. As they left the gym, Nathan felt lighter, like a weight he had carried since his father's death had begun to lift. The promise was still there, but it wasn't a burden anymore. It was a guide. A way to honor his father while being true to himself. He had been afraid of his strength, haunted by the memory of Marcus's injury, but now he understood. Strength wasn't about destruction. It was about standing up, protecting, building something better. Sarah had shown him that, and he had shown her she wasn't alone either. Walking home, Nathan glanced at the sky, the stars just beginning to peek through. Hey, Dad, he whispered to himself. I think I got it now. For the first time, he felt like his father would be proud, not just of his restraint, but of his courage. The school had changed. The hallways weren't perfect. Whispers still followed, and some kids avoided Nathan's gaze, but the air was different. David's absence left a void, and Nathan's presence filled it, not with fear, but with quiet strength. He and Sarah walked together, their laughter, a small rebellion against the pain of the past. They were more than survivors now. They were fighters in every sense of the word. Nathan's world wasn't perfect, but it was brighter. He had Sarah, a friend, who had seen him at his lowest and stood by him anyway. He had his strength, no longer a source of fear, but a tool to protect. And he had his father's promise, not a chain, but a compass guiding him toward a future where he could be both strong and kind. But they were learning to stand taller together. On Friday evening, Nathan and Sarah sat on the mats at Pine Wind Boxing Gym. The setting sun painted the room in hues of orange and gold. The air smelled of sweat and leather, a comforting constant in Nathan's shifting world. Sarah kicked her sneakers against the floor, her voice soft. I'm sorry I made you break your promise, she said, her eyes on her hands. The one to your dad about not hurting anyone. Nathan shook his head, his gaze fixed on his own hands, the knuckles scarred from years of training. I didn't break it, he said quietly. I used to think keeping that promise meant never fighting, no matter what. I was scared of my strength, scared of hurting someone like I hurt Marcus. He paused, the memory of his friend's pained face still sharp. But in the cafeteria, when I saw you crying, when I heard what David did, I realized something. Dad didn't mean for me to just take it. He meant for me to use my strength to protect what matters. You matter, Sarah. Sarah's eyes widened, a flush creeping up her cheeks. Wow, Carter getting all deep on me, she teased, but her voice was warm. For real, though, thank you. You had my back. I've never had that before. Nathan smiled a real smile, not the guarded one he'd worn for months. Same, he said. You gave me a reason to fight. Sarah grinned, standing and tugging her gloves on. Okay, enough mushy stuff. Spar with me. Nathan raised an eyebrow. You sure? I don't go easy. Sarah laughed, tying her hair back. Bring it, tough guy. They faced each other in the ring, bowing with respect, their shouts echoing as their fists met the air. Their shadows danced on the mats, a perfect blend of strength and trust, illuminated by the fading Sunday. As they left the gym, Nathan felt lighter, like a weight he'd carried since his father's death had begun to lift. The promise was still there, but it wasn't a burden anymore. It was a guide, a way to honor his father while being true to himself. He'd been afraid of his strength, haunted by the memory of Marcus's injury, but now he understood strength wasn't about destruction. It was about standing up, protecting, and building something better. Sarah had shown him that, and he'd shown her she wasn't alone either. Walking home, Nathan glanced at the sky. The stars just beginning to peek through. Hey, Dad, he whispered to himself. I think I got it now. For the first time, he felt like his father would be proud, not just of his restraint but of his courage. The school, change lingered. The hallways weren't perfect, whispers still followed, and some kids avoided Nathan's gaze. But the air was different. David's absence left a void, and Nathan's presence filled it, not with fear but with quiet strength. He and Sarah walked together, their laughter, a small rebellion against the pain of the past. They were more than survivors now. They were fighters in every sense of the word. Nathan's world wasn't perfect, but it was brighter. He had Sarah, a friend, who'd seen him at his lowest and stood by him anyway. He had his strength, no longer a source of fear but a tool to protect, and he had his father's promise, not a chain, but a compass, guiding him toward a future where he could be both strong and kind.